The Wolf Dog by Walt Morey. Chapter 6. Now that Kvik was able to move about, he improved rapidly. In the first couple of days, he inspected every inch of the strange house where he'd come to live with people. Laura let him out every afternoon, and he remained out until Andy returned home from school. Once Kvik enjoyed the crisp winter air and deep snow. It improved just the sort of violent exercise he needed to build back his strength. He spent his time traveling between the cannery and the house at Kurt's heels, or exploring the slopes behind the house, almost to the valley where Andy's trapline began. He was never out of sight of the house for long. He would come limping back through the snow to make sure everything was just as he left it. But Kvik never missed meeting Andy when he returned home from school through the dark belt of trees. That time sense which all animals have and which tells them when important things are to happen to them, told him within a minute or two just when Andy was due. He'd stand in the yard waiting, head up, ears pricked forward expectantly, yellow eyes watching the trail where it emerged from the timber. The moment Andy appeared, Kvik would let out a glad yelp and go struggling through the snow to him. He still ate in a corner of the kitchen and begged morsels while standing at Andy's elbow each night. After dinner, he would curl at Andy's feet, close enough so the boy could reach down and scratch his ears while he did his homework, but he no longer slept on a blanket in the corner of the kitchen. When Andy climbed the stairs to go to bed, Kvik now climbed beside him. He slept on the rug on the floor at the head of Andy's bed. In this manner was the memory of Charlie One-Eye and the 2 brutal years of his life wiped out of his mind. These 3 people in the house were his whole life. It was as if he had never had any other. Kvik's thin flanks filled out, the sheen returned to his thick, wolf-gray coat, and last of all, the limp completely disappeared. Once again, he looked like the magnificent animal George Hunter had seen win the North American at Fairbanks. On the 3rd weekend, Andy took Kvik with him when he ran the trapline. It was still dark. The earth was bathed in the soft light of a half-moon. When they crept down the stairs, let themselves quietly out of the house, and went up the slope. All morning, Kvik tore through the snow, leading the way. He'd make short side excursions to investigate, then rush back to check on the plodding Andy. He was particularly interested in the traps, and stood close at each set to watch the boy remove the game and reset the trap. As soon as they ate lunch, at noon they ate lunch, sitting side by side in the snow, in the protection of a log. Andy carefully tore each sandwich in 2 and fed half of it to Kvik. "I'll bet this is the first trapline you've ever run," Andy said. "Like it?" Kvik waved his tail and grinned. "Me too," Andy said, and ruffled the fur between the yellow eyes. "It gets real lonesome running a line alone." They came in time to the wreck of the plane and the iron cage. Kvik advanced cautiously. He sat down a few feet from the cage and studied it. He looked back at Andy as if asking for an explanation. The boy said, "You sort of remember it. Is that it?" As if the boy's voice gave him confidence, Kvik got up and moved closer, then sat down again. "Go ahead," Andy said. "Look at it good." Kvik moved forward again, thrust out his nose, and sniffed the iron bars. "See," Andy said. "It can't hurt you." Kvik walked all around the cage, then turned to Andy. Andy bent and put his arms around the dog's neck. Kvik whined softly and licked Andy's face. "Do you remember the cage?" Andy asked. "Do you know that Smiley was killed here? They say dogs sense things like that. Is that what's bothering you?" Kvik continued to whine and stayed close to Andy until the boy rose and started up the valley again. "It's lucky for you I came when I did that day," Andy said. "I guess it was lucky for both of us." After that first time, they passed the broken plane and iron cage many times, but Kvik never went near them again. The end of the trapping season came, and with its passing, Andy knew that spring and the annual salmon run would soon be here. George C. Hunter would return and find Kvik. Again, the rock was in Andy's stomach, and each night new indication of spring made it heavier. The daylight hours grew swiftly longer. The first warm breath blew softly across the land, shaking the snow burden from the trees. Snow began its annual retreat from the beach, back up the hill, past the house, and into the valley. It crept up the valley slopes, then stopped to form a white backbone that stretched along the tops of the high ridges. It would remain there all summer. The green and yellow tundra came into view. The first ducks and geese arrived, while the ponds and streams were still frozen over. Andy and Kvik watched the first big V of geese sail high over the ridge tops, dip into the valley. They had their look, then tilted upward again and flew on, heading for the nesting grounds farther north. A flight of mallards dived into the valley, heading for the nearby pond. They set their wings and glided in, mistaking the clear ice for water. The whole flight went tobogganing wildly across the ice with startled squawks and flapping wings, and piled up against the far bank. Andy laughed, and Kvik let go a stream of excited barks. The shocked ducks righted themselves, sprang into the air, and fled down the valley in panic. Overnight, the tundra burst into color as tiny flowers pushed through the carpet of moss. Willow and poplar buds opened. The alder thickets, which had looked like huge trees of huge tangles of dead bare limbs, became a mass of green. A dozen men flew in from Seattle to overhaul the cannery's machinery and make ready for the season. A pair of early sign boats came in from the south and tied to the dock to await the coming salmon run. The first salmon stragglers fought their way up the tiny stream. The rock in Andy's stomach grew heavier and heavier. Soon, school let out for the summer. The next day, Andy went to town to look for a job. During fishing season, every man in town who could get away went signing. This left vacancies in the local stores. Andy figured that this year he was old enough and big enough to fill one of these temporary openings. For the first time, he took Kvik with him. They walked the full length of the town's one street to Tom Murphy's hardware store. This would be a good place to start. Murphy's son, Bob, who worked in the store with his father, had gone signing last summer. Mr. Murphy scratched his head and said, "Bob's out right now trying to contact the skipper of the Lady Clare. That's the boat he was on last year. If he gets it, he'll go. Come see me again tomorrow, Andy." He leaned over the counter, adjusted his glasses, and looked down at Kvik. "That's quite a dog you've got there. Or is he a dog?" "He's part wolf," Andy said proudly. "His name's Kvik. It means Wolverine." "Mm-hmm," Mr. Murphy said. "He seems like I've heard that name somewhere." "He won the North American at Fairbanks," Andy said. He's Mr. Hunter's dog." "Sure, I remember. Well, you come see me tomorrow, Andy." On the street again, they were passing the Alaska bar when Pinky Davis, the bartender, hailed Andy. Andy had always liked Pinky. He was sort of fat and jolly. Now he stood in the Alaska's doorway with several signers and called, "Hey, Andy, where'd you get the wolf?" Andy stopped in the middle of this dirt street and said, "He's only part wolf. He's the lead dog that won the North American." "That's the dog Smiley Johnson was flying out for Hunter?" "Yes," Andy said. "His name's Kvik. It means Wolverine." "That's so," Pinky said, and he and the signers looked on Kvik with approval. A half-dozen dogs swung into the far end of the street and trotted forward in a tight pack. They were all local mongrels that seemed to belong to no one, and they scrounged their living where they could. As a pack, they terrorized every cat and every other dog in town. They were led by a big, ungangly, hound-like mongrel named Blackie. Blackie spotted Kvik and stopped. Here was an outsider, a stranger, and to add incentive, an animal that looked like a wolf. Blackie plunged forward, bawling at the top of his voice. The whole scrubby pack howled at his heels. Kvik waited until they were almost upon him. Then he whirled suddenly and, tail between his legs, dashed into the opening between the Alaska bar and Murphy's hardware. The pack charged into the opening after him. They cornered him against a high fence, and Blackie rushed in, struck the cringing Kvik, and bowled over him. He leaped upon Kvik, big jaws sprung wide. Kvik dodged Blackie, charged through the rest of the milling pack, and out into the street again. A small, long-haired dog, too slow to keep up with the pack, was just arriving to join in the fight. He charged into Kvik with short legs, got hold of a flying hind leg, and bit down. Kvik shook the small dog off with a frightened yelp of pain, raced the full length of the street with the pack in howling pursuit, and vanished among the trees, heading for home. "Well, holy mackerel!" Pinky Davis looked at the men around him. "Did you see that? Why, the little old rags even took a bite out of him, and he wouldn't fight back." He looked at Andy. "What'd you say his name meant? Wolverine? You sure it ain't Rabbit, Andy?" "Couldn't be a rabbit," one of the signers said seriously. "A good healthy rabbit would kill him." Andy turned around without a word and went blindly up the street, the laughter following him. He felt sick and bewildered and fighting mad. He'd like to take a club to that fat little Pinky Davis and his friend, and to that whole pack of dogs, especially Blackie. Oh, especially Blackie. Andy found Kvik crouched far back under the front porch in the dark. He coaxed him out and patted his head and scratched at the roots of his ears. "What's wrong with you?" he asked gently. "You could have licked that big Blackie easy. Then the rest would have left you alone. And that little mutt of rags. You could eat him in one bite. Why'd you run away like you were scared to death?" "You did act like a rabbit. Why? Why?" Kvik's ears were laid flat to his big head, and he whined pleadingly while his tail thumped the ground hopefully. "I don't understand," Andy said miserably. "I just don't understand." He took Kvik into the house with him. The dog went into his corner of the kitchen and lay down and looked disgraced. The dishes and food were on the table. Andy's father had just finished his lunch and was slipping on his coat in preparation to go back to the cannery. He looked down at Kvik and asked, "What's wrong with him?" "That bunch of dogs in town," Andy said angrily. "That Blackie." He told them what had happened. His father just stood there looking down at Kvik. "So he didn't make a complete recovery after all," Kurt Evans said. "But he's well and strong," Andy insisted. "You said yourself he couldn't look better." "Physically, he made a fine recovery," his father agreed. "But here," he tapped his chest, "he didn't make it. He's lost his confidence and courage." "How, Dad?" "Probably the plane wreck. He sustained injuries that would have killed any other dog. Then lay out there in the storm all that time, more dead than alive. It knocked all the fight out of him." "You said if he didn't make a complete recovery," Andy began fearfully. "I was thinking physically. He made it physically." "Will Mr. Hunter want him like this?" Andy asked. "No," Andy's mother said positively. "Then maybe Mr. Hunter will sell him to me," Andy said hopefully. "You wouldn't mind that every dog in town can run him ragged?" "I'd mind. I just wouldn't take him to town. Do you think he might sell Kvik to us, Dad?" "He might. A coward would be as distasteful to Mr. Hunter as a physical cripple, and no one else up here will want him. Selling him to you for anything he can get would probably be a way to recoup a little of his loss." Laura nodded. "That's how he'll look at it." She smiled at Andy. "I think you're going to have a dog." "It all depends on Mr. Hunter," Kurt said. "When he comes, you'll tell him how Kvik is." "I'll tell him," his father said grimly. "Mr. Hunter wouldn't take kindly to learning the sort of a dog he's become after he'd taken him home." Andy looked at Kvik and said with helpless anger, "He even ran away from that little old Rags. It doesn't make sense." "It makes sense. When he's 5 times bigger, a part wolf lead dog," Andy pointed out. "What's he got to fear from that little mutt?" "It's not really fear. It goes much deeper. All I know is he ran away like he was scared to death," Andy said. His father studied him a long moment. Then he said quietly, "Andy, sit down. I'll try to explain." Andy slipped into a chair. His father sat across from him and said, "Andy, I wanted to tell you something for some time, but I didn't know how to make it clear to you. Now maybe I can." "What's that, Dad?" His father looked at him, his hands clenched, and said, "Haven't you wondered why I'm working as a handyman around the cannery and as a watchman in winter, when I was once one of the top signers of the North?" Laura said in a sharp voice, "Kurt!" "It's time he understood," Evans said deliberately. "If he hasn't asked himself already, he soon will. And now that he's older, he'll be getting around these fishermen more. He'll hear talk, and he should have it straight. Andy's not a child anymore." Andy's mother looked from one to the other of them, biting her lips. Then she turned abruptly and left the room. Kurt Evans looked at Andy and Andy said, "Boats cost a lot of money." His father shook his head. "That's only part of the reason. Several people have offered to finance me. Mr. Hunter tried to get me back to take the Hustler, that big signer he is lying in the dock. I've said no every time." His father rubbed his hands together with a faint nervousness. "That's where Kvik and I are so much alike." "How do you mean, Dad?" "Remember when we lost our own boat, the Freedom, 5 years ago?" "I remember," Andy said. "She had struck a rock in the fog and sunk. 2 crewmen and his father's brother, his Uncle Eddie, had been lost. Before it was over, their home and all his father and mother's savings were gone. That night," his father said quietly, "I lost my confidence. I'm not physically afraid, but a man can take such a beating he loses the desire to try again. The heart is knocked out of you. You're empty. That's something you should have. That makes you want to fight is gone." Andy felt sick and shocked at hearing his father talk so. He suddenly wanted to protect him, to make excuses. He said, "But Dad, it likely wouldn't happen again." His father nodded. "I know that, but there is always the possibility. It's one of the hazards of signing, especially in these waters. In the past 5 years, your mother and I have managed to save a little. We want our own home. You've got a college ahead of you. It would all be wiped out if it happened to me a second time. I tell myself I can't take that chance, but there's more to it than that. I simply won't have the desire. I don't have the desire to make it a fight of it." "And it's something like that with Kvik," Andy said. "The plane crash, almost being killed, then lying there in the cage for days knocked all the fight out of him?" That's about it. He finds it easier to run away than to put up a rousing fight. Nothing is driving him to make the effort. It's easier for me to go along as I am, saving a little, getting our home, putting you through school, being secure, than to take any chance, however slim it might be. I see, Andy said, and he really did. But you still want Kvik, if Mr. Hunter will sell him? Yes. All right, I'll see what I can do. His father rose. Dad, Andy asked, will it always be this way with Kvik and... He bogged down, embarrassed. With Kvik and me, his father finished. With Kvik, I'd say yes. For myself, I don't know. I just don't know. Then he went out and down the trail to the cannery. Andy got the job at Murphy's Hardware. Every morning when he went to work, Kvik accompanied him through the trees, to the edge of town, and there he stopped. Never again did he venture into the street. He stopped well back in the trees where he could not be seen. Andy would pat his head and scratch his sharp ears and say, I've got to go to work now. You'd better go back home. Kvik would watch him enter the street, then turn and trot back down the trail. Pinky Davis didn't let Andy forget Kvik's experience with Blackie and the town dogs. Whenever Pinky saw Andy, he'd sing out, Andy, how's the rabbit? Or, when you gonna bring the rabbit to town again? We ain't had a good race down Main Street in some time. Maybe next time we can sell tickets or take bets, huh? Andy never answered Pinky Davis. He looked straight ahead and marched past the Alaska bar, his jaw set and his lips pressed tightly together, but he vowed that someday, somehow, he'd get even with Pinky Davis. At night, Kvik always waited in the fringe of the trees for him. The dog's time sense was amazingly accurate. He'd never missed. He'd been standing in the middle of the trail, his bushy tail waving as if he did a little dance, and he did a little dance step with his front feet to show how happy he was to see Andy. Andy would kneel in front of him so Kvik could put his big head back against the boy's chest, while Andy scratched his ears and talked to him. Did you have a good day? He'd ask. Did you go to the cannery with Dad? Then he'd tell Kvik about his day. I didn't do much. I don't know why Mr. Murphy keeps me around. Everybody's out fishing. Or, that Pinky Davis. Someday. Then he and Kvik would race home to the trees together. Andy had never had a pet to love before, and Kvik had never been loved or given his love. Now each was discovering how wonderful their companionship could be. Andy had stopped worrying about Mr. Hunter's eventual arrival. He was convinced that Mr. Hunter would never want Kvik once he knew what a coward he was. And, to ease his mind further, his father and mother were equally convinced. His one remaining problem was, how much would he have to pay for Kvik? And again, his reasoning and that of his father told him not much. Who else would want him? His father asked. A dog that's a coward is no good up here. The short signing season was half over when Andy, heading home one night, found no Kvik waiting for him in the fringe of the trees. He looked about for several minutes, whistling and calling. Blackie and his pack heard the whistling and padded down the street to investigate. Andy picked up a club and hurled it at them. Blackie stopped, and the pack stopped behind him. Andy picked up another club and started forward. You want to fight? He said to the big black dog. I'll give you one. Blackie swung about with the disdainful toss of his head and started down the street. The pack fell in at his heels. Rags, the little feist, trotted in the rear, his short legs pumping to keep up. Andy dropped the club and turned toward home. Maybe Kvik had gone to the cannery with his father and had forgotten the time, but he never had before. Or maybe Blackie and his pack had discovered him waiting here in the trees and had chased him home. He bet that was it. One of these days he'd get even with that Blackie. He'd get him good. Dinner was on the table when he walked in, and his father and mother were waiting for him. Kvik was not lying in his corner in the kitchen. Where's Kvik? He asked. He wasn't waiting for me. Andy's father looked at him and said nothing. Mr. Hunter was here right after lunch, his mother said gently. Oh, Andy looked at his father. You talked to him about Kvik. You told him how he was. How much does he want for him? Andy's father shook his head. He took him, Andy. Took him? You mean Kvik's gone? Andy's voice was high and a little sharp. You said you wouldn't want him. You said we could buy him. I said I didn't think he'd want him, his father said, patiently. Well, I was wrong. Did you tell him how he was? That he won't go to town because he's afraid of the other dogs? That even little feist Rags can chase him? Did you tell him, Dad? I told him, Andy. I even offered to take him downtown with Kvik and let the dogs chase him to prove it. He just stood there and smiled and didn't believe me. He thought I was just making up a story so he wouldn't want his dog and he could keep him, and we could keep him. I can't blame him for thinking that. Kavik looks wonderful, as you know. Big, healthy, and strong. He looks like that Kavik Mr. Hunter saw win the North American in Fairbanks. Yet that other part of Kavik that we know about just doesn't show on the surface. Mr. Hunter was just glad to get his dog back. But did you offer to buy him? Andy persisted. I didn't get a chance. That dog wasn't for sale at any price. Where is he now? Gone south aboard the Copper Queen. They've been gone about 4 hours. Mr. Hunter was very nice about it, Andy's mother said. He wanted to pay the doctor bill and offered us up to $200 for his keep, but we wouldn't accept it because we all enjoyed Kavik. He should have been nice, Andy said bitterly. You could have come and got me so I could have said goodbye to him. I thought it was better for both of you this way, his mother said. It would have been awfully hard on Kavik to be taken away from you, with you standing there. Anyway, you knew this could happen. You've always known it. I thought maybe we could keep him when Mr. Hunter understood how he was. I counted on it. I counted on it too, his father said thoughtfully. But how do you show a man when he refuses to be shown? When he won't look? It's disappointing, but it's not a tragedy, Andy's mother said practically. He had Kavik for a while, and we all loved and enjoyed him. Mr. Hunter likes him, and we'll give him a fine home and the best of care. That's the way we have to look at it now. Come and eat your dinner before it gets cold. Andy shook his head. I'm not hungry, he mumbled. There's no sense in being a child about this, his father said sharply. Come and eat. Let him go, Laura said quietly. Let him go. Andy went upstairs and sat on the bed and looked down at the rug where Kavik had slept every night. That rock was back in the pit of his stomach again. This time he felt it would never leave.